Episode 1. The Boy Who Spoke Without a Voice. They found him kneeling in the church ruins, barefoot, soaked in blood, staring at the altar that no longer stood. No one knew his name. No one had seen him arrive. But the moment Sister Agnes looked into his eyes, she whispered, "He is not here for salvation. He is here for judgment." The wind that blew through the shattered stained glass windows carried no warmth, only a silent soothing. It made even the dead statues turn their gaze. He never spoke, but the townsfolk claimed they heard him at night, whispers in their ears while they slept. Old sins, forgotten crimes, secrets that had never reached another soul nor confessed in their dreams. The boy was no prophet. He was something older, something more dangerous. Father Ellis, the last priest of St. Martyr's Parish, kept the boy hidden, locked in the old crypt beneath the sacristy. He brought him bread, water, and prayers, but every prayer seemed to rot inside that crypt. Words of God twisted as they left Ella's lips, Latin that bled, psalms that echoed back in reverse. "What are you?" he asked the boy once. The child simply stared. On the seventh night, the church bell rang at midnight. No wind, no hand, just a deep, thunderous clang that split the sky. The villagers gathered in fear, and that's when they saw it. A mark burning on the church wall, not drawn, not painted burned. A single phrase in a language older than scripture. "He is not God's messenger. He is God's memory." "What does that mean?" they asked. It meant God remembered every sin, even the ones no one dared speak. From that night on, people began to vanish. The liar, the adulterer, the priest who had buried truth for coin, gone without a scream, only a shadow left behind, etched in ash on the ground. And in the silence, a sound like weeping, but it came from the earth, not the sky. Only one man dared confront the boy again. Father Ellis. He knelt before the child in the crypt. "Are you the end?" he asked. The boy raised a finger to the priest's forehead, and Ellis saw it, a leaden burning, angels weeping, the devil himself crying in chains, not from pain, from shame, because even he had forgotten what humanity had done to God. Ellis wept, not for the world, for God, because God was not silent. He was grieving, and he had chosen a child not to speak, but to remind. Episode 2. The Man Who Feared the Eucharist. The pews were empty now. Mass was never spoken again after the boy arrived. But one man still came every morning, just after dawn, kneeling at the last unbroken bench. His name was Tobias Grin, the town's baker, and a man with more guilt than flour under his nails. Tobias once poisoned a child, not by accident, not in rage, but in silence, for reasons only the devil and God knew. The child had seen too much, said too little. Tobias was never caught, never even questioned, but the boy in the crypt knew. Each morning, Tobias came with trembling hands and a communion wafer he had stolen from the tabernacle years ago. He didn't eat it, he didn't dare, he simply held it until the wafer began to bleed. It started with a single red dot at the center. Tobias dropped it. It didn't fall. It hovered in the air, pulsing. The boy appeared behind him, though he had never left the crypt. His feet left no sound, his eyes no light, and yet, when he looked at Tobias, the man's breath caught in his throat like it had been noosed. "You remember?" The boy finally spoke, a whisper, but not from his lips. It was inside Tobias' skull, a sacred violation. I tried to forget," Tobias stammered, but heaven did not. The wafer spun in the air and burst into flame. Tobias screamed from pain, but from memory. The child he had killed smiled in the fire. Then the church doors slammed shut. Windows shattered inward. Wind spiraled like a funnel of voice children. Mothers, saints of mourning. When the sun rose higher, the pews were still empty, except for ash and the blood-marked stone where Tobias had knelt. No one dared touch it, because from that day forward, anyone who approached it heard one sentence etched into their bones: "You cannot take the body of Christ if your hands have already buried one." Episode 3. The Nun Who Hid Her Miracles. Sister Mireya had never doubted God. Not once, not even when her own tongue was cut out in a village raid when she was 10. She prayed in silence, wept in silence, healed in silence. His shield, for Mireya had a secret. Her hands could mend what man could not, bone, blood. Her touch reversed fevers. Her breath revived stillborns. But the church forbade her from speaking of it. Miracles are not for women, they said, especially not mute ones. So, she stitched her miracles into silence. But when the boy came, her power changed. It became darker and stronger. A dying man was brought to her one night. He had hanged himself in the barn. Lips blue, eyes glass. Mireya touched him. He awoke and screamed, not from pain, from what he had seen in death. He clawed at the walls, begged to be let back into the darkness, cried of fire that did not burn and angels that screamed in cages. Mireya trembled, and the boy appeared in the doorway. He looked at the resurrected man, then at Mireya. His gaze did not accuse, it mourned. You've brought him back, the boy said. Mireya, with her broken throat, shook her head desperately. You should have let him pass. He had repented. He was forgiven. The man's body began to shake. Blood poured from his eyes. His breath turned to smoke. You returned him to a world God had already released him from. A man burst into ash. Mireya fell to her knees, sobbing without sound. The boy approached her and gently touched her lips. You thought your silence made you pure, but silence can still sin. He kissed her forehead, and she heard again, but the only voice in her ears was God's grief. Episode 4. The Mirror That Refused Reflection. There was a mirror in the vestry, oval, cracked, hung by a single rusted nail behind a velvet curtain no one touched. It had once belonged to the confessional booth, but something inside it had made the priests cover it up long ago. Now it uncovered itself. The boy never walked toward it. The mirror came to him. It slid from the wall like it was pulled by a thread of judgment, landing upright at the foot of the crypt. And for the first time, the boy stepped back. Sister Agnes saw it from the chapel above. She descended the stairs, breath sharp, rosary clenched like a blade. She had feared that mirror for years because once it had shown her a future she swore she never lived. But now it was glowing, and the boy was not alone. In the mirror stood a version of him, not younger, not older, but emptier, a husk of light and ash, his twin in form, but not in soul. And it spoke, you were chosen to remind, but you have begun to judge. The real boy said nothing. The mirror version stepped closer, pressing its palm against the glass. God mourns, but you are turning his grief into wrath. Is that why you were made? For the first time, the boy looked afraid. Agnes gasped. That look of fear was not human. It was divine, as if heaven itself questioned its own reflection. The glass cracked. The boy fell to his knees, clutching his ears. Whispers poured from the mirror, down seams, hundreds, voices of those who had vanished. Not damned, not saved, stuck. You trapped them between. The mirror accused. You cleanse nothing. You remember, but remembers without mercy is a second hell. Agnes knelt beside him. Is this true? She whispered. The boy didn't speak, but his tears fell, and each one, as it touched the crypt floor, turned to salt. The mirror shattered, not with sound, but with silence so loud, it swallowed the air. When the dust cleared, only the frame remained, and inside it a single word, etched in fire, redeem. The boy looked up. For the first time, he trembled, because even the chosen could be warned. Episode 5. The Candle That Wouldn't Die. The church had long since stopped lighting candles. The faithful were gone, the saints' faces blackened with soot, and mics no longer melted for the prayers of the living. But one candle never went out. It burned in the left alcove, beneath the broken statue of Saint Dismas thief, who died beside Christ. No one knew who lit it. No one knew why it never melted. It was simply always there, until the boy touched it. He walked toward it in the quiet hour before dawn. His shadow stretched across the stone floor like a serpent, thin and long. Sister Agnes followed from a distance, her breath catching as the candlelight flickered against the boy's pale face. He bent down and cupped the flame in his hand. It did not burn him. Instead, it grew. The flame climbed his arm, soft and golden, wrapping around him like a robe of light. And as it did, voices filled the alcove down scenes, maybe hundreds, all speaking at once in languages lost to man. Not curses, not praises, regrets that had once died with the souls who carried them. Sister Agnes fell to her knees, overwhelmed. The scent of myrrh filled the space, thick and sacred. And Tina spoke. They want to come back. His voice was hoarse, cracked, as if unused for centuries. It was not the voice of a child. It was ancient, familiar, like the echo of someone she once loved, or feared, or both. They were not judged, he said. They were forgotten. The flame rose behind him, forming the silhouette of a door. Within it, figures trembled. Some reached forward, some recoiled, some screamed in silence. They begged for one thing, he whispered. Not heaven, not escape, Agnes asked, barely breathing. Then what? Redemption. The candle flared, then extinguished, and in its absence, the church grew colder, but the boy remained where he stood, now glowing faintly from within, as if the fire had entered his very soul. And somewhere, beneath the floorboards, the bones of Saint Dismas cracked open and smiled. Episode 6. The bell that rang without sound. It began again at midnight. No hands pulled the rope, no one stirred the tower, yet the old bronze bell above St. Martyr's swayed back and forth, its mouth wide, its song stolen. The town didn't hear it, but they felt it. Sleep turned sour, dreams twisted, doors unlatched themselves, dogs whimpered into the night, and deep beneath the church, the boy Saturday alone in the crypt, staring upward, as if waiting for the silence to become a voice. Sister Agnes had not slept in 3 nights. She knew this bell. It had not rung since the war, when fire rained from the sky and faith melted like wax. And even then, it had screamed with sound, not silence. She climbed the narrow bell tower steps barefoot, rosary in one hand, a dagger in the other. Yes, a dagger, forged by monks, hidden beneath the altar, dipped in sacred oil and inscribed with a single word, Abedire. To obey, not question. At the top, she saw the bell. It moved gently, a pendulum of judgment. Beneath it stood the boy, waiting. You shouldn't be here, Agnes whispered. The boy turned slowly. His face was blank, unreadable, but his eyes shimmered with tears not yet wept. They're calling from beneath, he said. Oh, the ones buried beneath your silence, the forgotten faithful, the obedient. Agnes looked down at the dagger in her hand. It trembled. They obeyed, the boy said, and they were buried for it. Not honored, not remembered, just silenced. He stepped forward and placed his palm on the bell. The metal lit up with pale blue fire, and then she heard it not with ears, but with memory, cries from years past, mothers weeping in Latin, men whispering prayers into bullets, children confessing before the bombs fell. They thought God was deaf, the boy said, but he wasn't. He was weeping so loudly, he could not answer. The bell cracked. From its base, a thin silver smoke rose into the night. Now, he whispered. He listens again, and then the bell stopped. Not because it finished, but because something else began. Below them, every grave in the churchyard shivered, and one began to open. Episode 7. The grave that breathed. The earth opened like a wound. It wasn't fast. It wasn't violent. The soil simply gave way as if it had been waiting. Moss peeled back, roots recoiled, and the headstone crumbled without sound. Sister Agnes stood frowning at the top of the bell tower, the cracked dagger clutched against her chest. Below, the boy knelt beside the grave, whispering words not meant for human tongues. The villagers watched from their windows. None dared speak, none dared blink. They only stared as the boy reached into the grave with bare hands and pulled something out. It wasn't a corpse. It wasn't dust. It was a woman, unaged, her eyes closed, her breath slow, like someone waking from a 1,000-year sleep. Her skin glowed faintly with the color of candlelight, her white dress untarnished by soil. The boy cradled her head. For a moment, he looked almost human, tender, fragile, small. Then the woman opened her eyes and screamed, not from pain, from memory. She clawed at her chest, whispered prayers in tongues long dead. Not again, she sobbed. Don't make me remember. The boy leaned close and whispered, you must. Sister Agnes descended the tower slowly, her knees trembling with each step. She knew this woman. Her name was Helena, a nun, buried 27 years ago. Buried alive. Helena had known a truth the church refused. She had seen a miracle denied by the bishops, and so they silenced her net with excommunication. With earth, the boy placed her on the stone steps. She was the first, he said, but not the last. Agnes dropped the dagger. It shattered. because truth had risen, and the ground was no longer holy, it was witness. Episode 8, The Choir of Hollow Voices. The next morning, the sky refused to turn blue. Gray clouds hovered like unmoving sentinels above the chapel, and the sun hid as if ashamed. Birds didn't sing, trees didn't sway, and inside the nave of St. Martyrs, the air was heavy with breathless anticipation. Helena had not spoken a word since her return. She sat in the first pew, hands clasped as if still praying, her eyes vacant, not blind, just somewhere else. The boy sat beside her. He did not touch her. He didn't need to. A strange rhythm pulsed between them, like a heartbeat made of silence. Then the voices began, not from their mouths, from the walls. The cracked stone whispered, down scenes, hundreds, some sobbing, some laughing, some begging for someone to listen. They filled the church like a ghostly choir with no melody, just longing. Sister Agnes stood in the aisle, clutching her rosary. What are they? She asked the boy. The forgotten hymns, he answered, the ones no one dared sing. One voice broke through them all, stronger, angrier, desperate. Why did you abandon me? It echoed from the altar. The boy rose and walked toward it. Helena followed. A breeze began to stir inside the chapel. Though the doors were shut, the altar candles lit by themselves, one by one, forming a ring of fire. In the center, a shadow took form, a priest's silhouette, but hollow, his robes moving without a body. I gave my life, the voice cried, and you gave me silence? Agnes recognized the voice. Father, Minka. He had hanged himself 10 years ago, found with a confession nailed to his chest, a confession the church burned. The boy approached the shadow and bowed his head. You were never abandoned, he said. You were censored. The shadow lunged forward but stopped just before the boy, frowned by some unseen force. Peace is not given by silence, the boy whispered. It is earned by truth. The ghost broke apart like ash in wind. And then, for one breathless moment, the choir fell silent, until a single voice, a child, sang a hymn long forgotten, and everyone wept, even the statues. Episode 9. The prophet who ate his words. His name was Thomas Vale. He had once been called a prophet by those who feared his visions, but over time, the church stripped him of that title, silenced his sermons, and erased his writings from the archives. They said he had gone mad, that he spoke in riddles, that his words sowed fear, not faith. So Thomas swallowed them, literally, page by page, night after night. He ate his own prophecies, ink-stained tongue, scripture-flaked teeth. The madness they feared became real not because of what he saw, but because of what he chose to forget. He had been locked away in the convent's abandoned library, walled off behind rotting hymnals and crumbling stone, forgotten until now. The boy found him. Agnes followed close behind. The hall's darker than she remembered. When they reached the sealed door, it opened before them like a wound tearing through memory. Inside sat a Thomaskin like parchment, as black as burnt pages. But when he saw the boy, he began to scream. No more words, no more visions. The boy said nothing. He only held out a single page. It floated before Thomas like a leaf on still water. Thomas tried to look away. He couldn't. It was a page he had never written. It said, "You were right." Thomas collapsed. Weeping ink from his mouth spewed ashen letters, words he had buried inside himself for years. They scattered across the stone floor and began to rearrange on their own, forming sentences in fire. The silence of the church is not the silence of God. Agnes gasped. Thomas looked up, trembling. Then what is it? The boy answered, soft and hollow. A choice. And the words on the floor caught flame. Thomas did not burn. He glowed. A final prophecy, not spoken but lived. Episode 10. The baptism that burned backwards. They brought the basin from the ruins, a cracked font of stone, veined with old soot and sanctified blood. It held holy water in decades, but the boy told them it would. Once more, no one questioned him. Not after Thomas, not after the voices, not after Helena rose from the earth. The villagers gathered at the church steps, eyes hollow with faith they didn't remember choosing. Among them stood a woman named Clara, cradling a child who had not cried since birth. That child blinked, watched the boy, and reached for it with fingers, but with something older, something unseen. The boy placed his hand above the basin. Rain began to fall inside the church. Drop by drop, clear and cold, water filled the cracked stone. But when Clara stepped forward, the water turned dark, not black, not red, something in between, like ink remembering fire. "This is not for innocence," the boy said. "It is for memory." Clara hesitated. "Will it hurt?" she asked. The boy looked at the child, then back at Clara. "It will reveal." She lowered the baby into the basin, and the moment flesh touched water, light exploded, silent, golden, searing. Visions filled the air, a bishop's hand over a mouth, a mother burying her rosary in secret, a saint who screamed beneath a gilded mask, and a child, this child watching it all in another life. When the light faded, the baby wept. For the first time, tears rolled like relics down his cheeks, and every drop turned into a names lost to the church. Now floating above the basin like smoke, Agnes fell to her knees. "This is no baptism," she whispered. The boy nodded. "No, it's a return." The water in the basin boiled away, and the names remained, circling the child like a crown. Above them, the bell began to toll again. This time, it rang forward. Episode 11. The confession that was never spoken. There was one door in the church no one dared open. It was sealed behind the altar, wrapped in chains blackened with age and prayers that had lost their purpose. Carved above it in iron were the words, "Ad diem silentium." To God, silence. Only the boy held the key. He walked barefoot down the aisle, past Clara and the weeping child, past Agnes, whose rosary now glowed with heat. When he reached the chain door, he opened not with force but with permission. Behind it lay a single confessional booth, rotten, crumbling, covered in wax, as if hundreds of candles had once wept upon it. The inside was darker than shadow. The boy entered and waited. Then she arrived. Not Helena, not Clara, not Agnes. The woman with no name. She wore black, a mourning veil over her face. No footsteps, yet the air shifted with her presence. She did not sit. She stood outside the confessional, trembling. "I have no voice," she said. The boy responded, "Then your guilt will speak for you." From the shadows, her memories rose. A parchment burned before a council. A secret child left at a cathedral's doorstep. A priest silenced with a kiss and a knife. None of it made her weep. But when the boy asked, "Do you regret it?" she broke. Her veil fell, and beneath it, her face was made of mirror search, one reflecting someone else's sin. Her own could not be seen. "I don't know who I am," she whispered. The boy stepped from the booth. He placed a hand over her heart. "You are the confession the church refused to hear." And then she collapsed into dust, but her final breath remained a glowing wisp, hovering between the pews. Agnes caught it, held it, and heard the words only God had ever heard. "Forgive me for being silent too long." Episode 12. The Devil Who Watched from the Pew. That morning, the church smelled of myrrh and smoke. A wind had passed through every corridor, as if something ancient had exhaled. The boy stood at the altar in silence. He was not alone. A man had entered the chapel at dawn, cloaked in gray, with hands to steel and eyes to hold. He sat in the last pew, quiet, watching. No one else saw him, but Agnes did. She felt him. The boy turned slowly. "You waited long enough," he said. The figure smiled. "I was told I would weep," the man said, his voice like a psalm dragged through gravel. "And now, I feel something worse." The boy nodded. "Shim." The man stood and removed his hood. No horns, no flames, just a face that looked like it had seen too much beauty and destroyed it all. Agnes stepped forward, trembling. "Who are you?" she whispered. The man turned. "I am the one who begged for forgiveness and was told to wait." He looked at the crucifix above the altar. His eyes filled. "I watched heaven grieve. I watched God hide his face. And then, he made you?" The boy stepped down from the altar. "Not to punish, to remind." The man finished. He fell to his knees, not in prayer, in surrender, and he began to cry. Not fire, not brimstone. Tears, real, salt, holy. They fell onto the church floor and did not sizzle. They bloomed. Tiny white lilies sprouted from the stone where the devil wept. Agnes covered her mouth. Helena wept behind her. Even the statues seemed to bow. Because in that moment, the church was not haunted. It was healing. and the devil as heaven's echo had remembered what it meant to mourn. Episode 13. The altar that remembered. The lilies bloomed for 7 days. No one dared touch them. The boy did not speak. The devil did not leave. And the townspeople came each morning, drawn by something they could not name. They lit candles, not in prayer but in remembrance, not of miracles, but of mistakes. And, on the 8th morning, the altar cracked. It wasn't a sound of stone breaking. It was a sound like breath being held for too long and finally exhaled. From the center of the altar, something rose, a book, ancient and bound in light and leather. Its cover bore no title, only a single handprint, small, childlike. The boy stepped forward. "This is not scripture," he said. "This is what was erased." He opened the book, and though unheld, pages turned on their own. Words glowed and faded. Some sentences spoke in screams, others in lullabies. But every page bore a memory the church had hidden, rewritten, or destroyed. A mother accused of blasphemy for naming her daughter Grace. A child who spoke to angels and was buried for it. A priest who loved another man and lit candles in secret. Each page burned, and from its ash, a bell chimed. The boy turned to Agnes. "It's time." "For what?" she asked. "For the altar to speak back." He placed the book on the cracked stone. The lilies wilted, and then the church filled with voices. Not cries, not curses, testimonies. Every forgotten soul who had ever wept into silence now spoke in it for vengeance, but for recognition. And the boy, with hands that had never held judgment, raised the book and whispered, "Let this be remembered not as prophecy, but as proof." The altar closed, but the echoes remained. Episode 14. The silence that broke heaven. No bell rang that morning, no birds, no wind, not even breath. Only a silence so thick it made time itself hesitate. The book was gone sealed inside the altar, its truth now part of the stone. The devil remained at the back of the church, eyes closed, lips moving in prayers no one taught him. The boy stood before the altar, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly upward, listening. Agnes stepped forward. "What now?" He turned to her slowly. "Now we wait." "For what?" He looked past her, beyond the doors, beyond the graveyard, beyond the horizon. For them, the church doors burst open up by storm, but by arrival, figures in gold and crimson entered, their robes embroidered with eyes, tongues, and flames. Cardinals, inquisitors, holy men without holiness, bearing scrolls and swords. At their head walked a man with a smile sharp as doctrine. "Where's the heretic?" The boy stepped forward. The devil rose. "I warned you," the man said. "Any altar that speaks without permission must be broken." Agnes moved to shield the boy, but he held out his hand. No more hiding. The inquisitors surrounded him. They raised the scrolls, recited charges, declared him unholy, dangerous, damned. He said nothing until the lilies bloomed again, white, tall, thousands of them, from cracks in the floor, from walls, from mouths that had only known silence. And then, from the altar, a voice spoken at the boys. "You buried my children. You burned my memory. You sang of love but spoke in fear." The inquisitors trembled. "I was never gone. I was grieving." The golden man dropped his scroll. Flames erupted from it. And the boy, surrounded by lilies, whispered, "This is not rebellion. This is resurrection." He stepped forward, and heaven broke open. Episode 15. The child who was never born. The moment heaven broke open, the sky did not shine, it shattered. Clouds did not part, they tore. Thunder did not roar, it mourned. And from above came a light, not of fire, nor grace, but remembrance. The boy stood at the altar, eyes closed, arms raised in power, but in surrender. The lilies turned to ash, the pews cracked, but no one fled. Not the villagers, not the devil, not even the inquisitors, who now wept without knowing why. From the broken ceiling descended a figure. It was not God. It was what God lost. A child of light, faceless and unnamed, weeping golden tears that burned the floor without flame. Agnes fell to her knees. Helena held her breath. Even the devil turned away. The boy opened his eyes. "I know you," he said. The figure spoke without sound. "I was never born." And yet everyone in the church remembered it. A soul that should have lived, should have walked, should have wept and prayed and doubted and loved, but was erased before breath. "Why now?" the boy asked. "Because you remembered me," the bean answered. The child stepped forward. No footsteps, no shadow, only presence. It embraced the boy, and in that embrace, the church pulsed, not with wrath, not with miracles, with truth. Everyone saw their own unspoken name written in light. Their sins, their silence, their beauty, their failures, and none of it was judged. The boy wept into the child's shoulder. "I was only meant to remind them," he said. "You did." The light spread across the floor, peeling away every lie, every erasure, every forgotten grace. And when it faded, the boy was gone, but the lilies returned, thousands of them, and in the center of the altar, carved deep into the stone, he did not speak to condemn, he remembered to heal. Agnes whispered it aloud, and the devil, sitting quietly in the last pew, smiled.